It started with an argument. One of those pointless, fiery clashes that leave you wondering how two people who once couldn't spend a second apart now can't share a room without a war breaking out. Amanda was pacing the living room, her sharp heels tapping against the hardwood like an impatient metronome. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching her unravel. "You just don't get it, do you, Nathan?" she snapped, her voice breaking with frustration. "I feel trapped. Trapped in this house, in this life that you think is perfect." That word, trapped, hit me like a freight train. What was she even saying? We'd had fights before, sure, every couple does. But this wasn't about whose turn it was to take out the trash. This was deeper. "What do you mean by that, Amanda? You keep saying you need more, but you're going out 3 nights a week already. What else do you want?" I tried to keep my tone steady, though my hands clenched into fists by my sides. She laughed, cold and bitter, a sound I barely recognized. "A few nights out with friends, and you act like I'm abandoning you. God, Nathan, not everything is about you." "Who said it was about me?" I shot back, sharper than intended. "But yeah. Excuse me for wanting to know why my wife keeps leaving and comes back smelling like cheap gin and regret." Something shifted in her gaze then. It wasn't anger or defiance. It was panic. But it was only a flicker, barely enough for me to catch before she masked it with an almost calculated bravado. "Wow, paranoid much? Maybe focus on why you're so suffocating lately instead of blaming me for needing space." She grabbed her purse with jerky, frustrated movements. "You know what? Mia and the girls are at the Lux Lounge tonight. I'm going to join them." "Like hell you are." I stepped in front of the door, my heart racing. "We're not done talking, Amanda. Running away every time things get hard won't solve anything." Her expression darkened, but then she smiled. A wicked, condescending smile that made my skin crawl. "Move, Nathan, or I swear you'll regret it." I didn't move. Something told me that letting her leave would be a mistake. But before I could say anything else, she shoved past me, slamming the door so hard the frames on the wall rattled. I stood there, stunned, listening to her heels click down the driveway and then the distant roar of the car engine. She'd walked out before, but this time it felt different, like something in our lives was cracking, breaking in slow motion. I waited for hours, my phone on the coffee table. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. came and went. By the time dawn began to streak the sky, I was sitting in the dark, every nerve in my body alight with dread. Then I heard it, the sound of keys fumbling at the lock. Amanda stepped inside, disheveled, her usually perfect hair a tangled mess, makeup smeared in a way that wasn't just from a night of dancing. Her clothes were rumpled, and she reeked of something sour and unfamiliar. Before I could say a word, she collapsed onto the couch, sobbing loudly, almost theatrically. "I'm sorry," she wailed, her voice cracking. "It was a crazy night, Nathan. I didn't mean to upset you." Her words hit the air, but they didn't reach me. My eyes were locked on a faint red mark on her neck, half hidden by her hair. "Amanda," I finally said, my voice low and steady. "What happened last night?" She looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks, her face a portrait of guilt and defiance. "I told you," she stammered. "We danced, we drank. I lost track of time. That's all." Her explanation was too rehearsed, too quick. And that mark, it wasn't from a necklace or her hair brushing awkwardly. It screamed at me to ask more questions. "Who were you with?" She hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "Mia and the girls," she said, too fast. "At the Lux Lounge, like I said." "Really?" I crossed my arms. "Then why did Mia post on Instagram last night? She and the girls were at Rosso's Tavern, not the Lux." Her face paled. It was quick, just a flicker, but I caught it. "She probably posted the wrong place," Amanda said, laughing nervously. "You know how she is with technology." I didn't flinch. "Amanda, either you're lying or she is, and something tells me it's not Mia." Her tears dried instantly, replaced by anger. "Why are you interrogating me like this? I told you it was just a night out, but I wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time." Amanda exploded upstairs, slamming the door to our bedroom so hard I thought it might splinter. For a long moment, I stood frozen in the living room, her final words echoing in my head. Why are you interrogating me like this? This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was something else entirely. I followed her, each step up the staircase feeling heavier than the last. When I reached our bedroom, I pushed the door open to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. Amanda, I started, keeping my voice measured. You've never lied to me like this before. What's going on? She didn't look up. For a second, I thought she might break. Finally tell me the truth. But then she lifted her head, and her expression hardened. You're making a big deal out of nothing, she said, her tone clipped. I told you, it was just a night out. And that mark on your neck? What's your explanation for that? Her hand instinctively shot up to touch her neck, her eyes narrowing. Seriously, Nathan? It's nothing. I must have scratched myself or something. Scratched yourself? I repeated, incredulous. Do you think I'm blind, Amanda? She stood abruptly, crossing her arms. What do you want me to say? That I had some wild affair? Fine. Let's pretend that's what happened. Is that what you need to hear to feel better about yourself? Her words were a slap in the face. No, I said sharply. What I need is the truth. She laughed bitterly. The truth? The truth is that I'm bored. Nathan. Bored of this house, this marriage, this routine. Last night was the first time in months I felt alive. Her words hit like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. Bored, I managed to say, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. So you sneak off to, what? Drink with strangers? Flirt with God knows who? Her silence was deafening. Who is he? I demanded, stepping closer. Just tell me, Amanda. Who the hell were you with last night? She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stormed past me, her shoulder brushing mine as she headed for the door. Where are you going now? I called after her, my frustration boiling over. To cool off, she snapped without looking back. And just like that, she was gone again. The next morning, I woke to the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My head was pounding from a restless night, my mind spinning with every possible scenario of what she'd done, or who she'd been with. She walked into the kitchen, wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast outside. She didn't say anything, just poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the table as if everything were normal. Where were you? I asked, my voice sharp. She took a sip of coffee, her lips tightening into a thin line. Don't start, she said, setting the mug down. Start, I snapped. Amanda, you left in the middle of a fight and didn't come home until morning. You expect me to just let that slide? She sighed dramatically, removing her sunglasses to reveal tired, red-rimmed eyes. I stayed at Mia's, she said flatly. At Mia's? I repeated, my voice dripping with skepticism. Yes, she said, glaring at me. I needed space, Nathan. Is that a crime now? I stared at her, trying to decide if I believed her. But something didn't add up. What about your phone? I asked. Why didn't you answer any of my calls or texts? She shrugged. It was on silent. I didn't check it until this morning. I didn't buy it, not for a second. Right? I said, standing. Well, I'm glad you're back. But this conversation isn't over. Can't wait, she muttered under her breath as I walked out of the room. I spent the next few hours pacing the house, trying to make sense of everything. Amanda had always been complicated, headstrong, fiery, but this was different. She was lying to me, I was sure of it. But why? I needed answers. When she went upstairs to shower, I seized the opportunity to search her purse. Felt wrong, like a violation of trust, but trust had already been shattered. My hands trembled as I rifled through her bag. Lipstick, receipts, gum wrappers. And then I found it. A hotel key card. My stomach dropped. It was for the Grand Montclair, the kind of high-end hotel we'd only splurged on once years ago for an anniversary. The card was crisp and clean, like it hadn't been used more than once. I stared at it, my mind racing. When Amanda came back downstairs, she was humming a tune under her breath. her hair wrapped in a towel. "Heading out?" she asked casually when she saw me by the door. "Yeah," I said, slipping the key card into my pocket. "I've got some errands to run." She nodded, seemingly unbothered, and went back to her coffee. As I stepped outside, the cold January air hit me like a slap. My destination was clear: the Grand Montclair. The drive to the Grand Montclair was a blur. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind a whirlwind of questions and worst-case scenarios. What was Amanda doing there? Who had she met? The hotel loomed ahead, its pristine facade mocking me with its elegance. I pulled into the lot and sat there for a moment, staring at the entrance. This was it. The answers I dreaded might be waiting just beyond those glass doors. I stepped inside, the lobby warm and bustling with the quiet hum of luxury. A grand chandelier sparkled overhead, and the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers filled the air. My heart raced as I approached the front desk. "Good afternoon, sir." The receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. "How can I assist you?" I hesitated, my throat dry. I found this key card," I said, fishing it from my pocket. "I wanted to check if it was still active or if someone turned it in." The receptionist took the card and scanned it. "Room 1223, she said, glancing up at me. "This card is still active, but I'd need to see an ID to confirm access." "Right?" I said, my pulse hammering. "I actually just wanted to make sure it wasn't lost." "Thanks." She smiled politely and handed the card back. I stepped away from the desk, my mind spinning. Room 1223. Amanda's connection to it hung over me like a storm cloud. I needed to know more. After an agonizing wait, I slipped into the elevator when no one was looking. My hands trembled as I pressed the button for the 12th floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a quiet hallway, plush carpet muffling my footsteps. Room 1223 was at the far end. My heart pounded louder with every step. I stood in front of the door, staring at the number like it might attack me. Taking a deep breath, I inserted the key card. The light blinked green, and the lock clicked. The door creaked open, revealing a pristine hotel room. It was empty, but the air inside felt heavy, like a secret waiting to be uncovered. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The room was immaculate: freshly made bed, untouched toiletries in the bathroom. Could have been any hotel room, but I knew better. On the nightstand, a folded piece of paper caught my eye. My hands shook as I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a note, written in Amanda's unmistakable handwriting. "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again." No name.
No signature.
Just those gut-wrenching words. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the note. My chest felt hollow, my breath shallow. This wasn't just suspicion anymore, this was proof. I didn't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I forced myself to move. I took photos of the note with my phone, then carefully folded it back and placed it where I'd found it. As I stepped out into the hallway, I felt like a man walking away from a crime scene. Back in the car, the weight of what I'd found pressed down on me like a physical force. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny it anymore. Amanda had betrayed me. By the time I got home, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like it was any other day. She glanced up as I walked in. "That was quick," she said, her tone casual. I didn't respond. Instead, I went straight to the kitchen and poured myself a drink, the amber liquid trembling in the glass. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice tinged with feigned concern. I turned to face her, holding her gaze. "Where were you the other night, Amanda?" Her expression barely faltered. "I told you, I was at Mia's." I set the glass down on the counter, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Stop lying to me." Her jaw tightened. "Nathan, I'm not doing this with you again." "You're right," I said, stepping closer. "We're not doing this again. Because this time I have proof." Her eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her facade. "Room 1223, I said, watching her carefully. She froze, her face draining of color. "I went to the Grand Montclair," I continued. "Found your little note. Last night was perfect. Care to explain? For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, like flipping a switch, her demeanor changed. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. So you're spying on me now? She snapped. Digging through my things? Following me around? That's what we've come to. Don't turn this on me, I said, my voice rising. You lied to my face, Amanda. I deserve to know the truth. She scoffed, shaking her head. Fine, you want the truth? I needed an escape, Nathan. From you, from this life. I didn't think it would matter. Her words felt like a knife to the chest. It mattered to me, I said, my voice trembling. It mattered to the life we built together. She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Where are you going now? I demanded. Out, she said coldly. I can't do this right now. And just like that, she was gone. Amanda's absence that night was both a relief and a torment. I couldn't sit still. Every corner of the house felt suffocating, filled with memories of a life I was beginning to doubt had ever been real. I paced the living room, her words replaying in my mind. I needed an escape. From you. From this life. How long had she been feeling that way? How long had I been blind to it? At some point, I found myself at the dining table, Amanda's laptop sitting innocently in front of me. She wasn't particularly tech-savvy. Her passwords were always easy to guess. With shaking hands, I typed in the usual, our wedding anniversary. The screen unlocked, revealing her desktop. I opened her browser first, scanning through her search history. It was clean, too clean. It had either been wiped or she'd been careful not to leave a trail. Next, I checked her emails. At first glance, everything seemed ordinary, work updates, newsletters, online shopping receipts. But then I noticed a folder labeled Personal. Inside were a handful of emails exchanged with someone named D. My stomach tightened as I clicked the first one. Thanks for last night. I can't stop thinking about you. The email was dated 2 weeks ago. The next one was from Amanda. It was perfect. I wish I could stay longer next time. I scrolled through the chain, each message more damning than the last. They mentioned meeting at hotels, secret dinners, and the thrill of hiding. The most recent email was from 2 days ago. 12:23 again? You spoil me. I'll see you there tonight. Let me know when it's safe. My hands clenched into fists, the words blurring on the screen. I didn't need to wonder anymore who Amanda had been with. D. Who was D? The following morning, I reached out to the only person I trusted enough to help me. My friend Chris. He'd been my best man at our wedding, and though we hadn't spoken as much recently, I knew I could count on him. Chris, I said over the phone, my voice tight, I need a favor. He didn't ask many questions, just agreed to meet me at a nearby coffee shop. When I explained the situation, he listened quietly, his expression darkening. So, what's the plan? He asked, leaning back in his chair. I need to know who this guy is, I said. His emails don't give much away, just that his name might start with D and that they've been meeting at hotels. Chris nodded, rubbing his jaw thoughtfully. I can help with that. I've got some friends who can dig into it, but it'll take a few days. Anything you can find, I said, desperation seeping into my tone. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. We'll figure it out. Those next few days were torture. Amanda acted like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't detonated our marriage with her lies. She still left the house at odd hours, claiming to meet friends or run errands, but I knew better now. I didn't confront her again. Not yet. I needed more. When Chris finally called with an update, I could barely contain my nerves. His name's Daniel Rivers, he said. He's a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company. Travels a lot. Married with 2 kids. Lives about an hour away from you. The information hit me like a freight train. Amanda wasn't just lying to me. She was entangled with a man who had his own family, his own life. I also found something else, Chris added, his tone cautious. I checked out Daniel's wife. Her name's Jessica. I think she might know something. What do you mean? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. She posted a cryptic message on social media last week. something about trust being shattered. And a few days ago, she checked into a relationship counseling forum, looking for advice on dealing with infidelity. She knows, I said, the realization sinking in. It seems like it, Chris agreed. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Jessica Rivers might be the key to exposing everything. That evening, Amanda came home late, as usual. She barely glanced at me as she walked through the door, her heels clicking against the floor. Long day, I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Exhausting, she replied, kicking off her shoes. I'm going to take a bath. She disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I pulled out my phone and searched for Jessica Rivers. Her profile wasn't hard to find. Her posts were carefully curated. Smiling family photos, quotes about love and perseverance. But Chris was right. One post from last week stood out. Trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the message button. After a moment's hesitation, I typed a quick note. Hi Jessica, I think we need to talk. It's about Daniel. I hit send, my heart pounding. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. Jessica had replied, "Who is this?" I took a deep breath before responding. "My name is Nathan. My wife, Amanda, has been seeing your husband. I thought you deserved to know." The three dots appeared almost immediately, and then her response came through. "Where can we meet?" Jessica and I arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our towns. I arrived early, sitting by the window with a clear view of the parking lot. My stomach churned as I replayed the conversation I was about to have. When she walked in, I recognized her instantly. Jessica was composed, her expression a careful mask of calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. She spotted me and approached, her heels clicking against the tile floor. "Nathan?" she asked, her voice steady but guarded. I nodded and stood, extending a hand. She shook it briefly before sitting across from me. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, my throat dry. She nodded, her fingers wrapping tightly around the coffee cup the server had placed in front of her. "I wasn't sure if this was a prank," she admitted, "but when you mentioned Daniel..." Her voice trailed off and she looked down, her composure cracking ever so slightly. "I'm sorry," I said, genuinely meaning it. "I wish I didn't have to bring this to you." "Just tell me," she said, looking up. "Tell me what you know." I recounted everything, the hotel keycard, the emails, the nights Amanda had been missing. I even showed her screenshots of the messages I'd found on Amanda's laptop. Jessica listened without interrupting, her face pale but unreadable. When I finished, she took a deep breath and reached into her purse. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her gallery before turning it toward me. There were photos of Daniel, laughing at a bar, sitting on a hotel bed, his tie loosened around his neck. In each photo, Amanda was there too, her smile radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I found these last week," Jessica said, her voice trembling. I didn't know who she was until now. The weight of her words settled over us like a heavy fog. "What do we do?" I asked finally. Jessica stared out the window, her jaw tightening. "We get answers. Together." Jessica and I spent the next few days piecing together everything we could about Amanda and Daniel's affair. She forwarded me texts she'd found on Daniel's phone, messages filled with promises of secret getaways and thinly veiled frustrations about their marriages. One particularly damning message from Amanda read, "If only he wasn't so predictable, I wouldn't need to keep running to you to feel alive." The words stung, each one twisting the knife in my chest. Jessica, too, was struggling. "I keep thinking about our kids," she said during one of our calls. "How do I explain this to them if it all comes out?" Her pain was palpable, and though we were practically strangers, we found solace in sharing our anger and heartbreak. Finally, we decided it was time to confront them. Together, Jessica and I coordinated our plan down to the minute. Daniel had told her he'd be working late that Friday, and Amanda had already mentioned to me she'd be out with the girls. It didn't take much digging to figure out they'd booked room 1412 at the Grand Montclair. An upgrade, apparently, from their usual spot. Jessica picked me up just after sunset. Her jaw was set, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as we drove to the hotel. "You ready for this?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. I nodded, though my heart felt like it might explode. "I have to be." We parked across the street and waited, the minutes ticking by agonizingly slow. Finally, we saw them. Amanda and Daniel walked out of the lobby together, laughing. Amanda wore a dress I'd never seen before, deep green silk that clung to her frame in all the right places. She looked radiant, glowing in a way that made my stomach churn. Daniel had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward a nearby restaurant. They didn't notice us as we followed at a safe distance. Jessica and I exchanged a glance. This was it. We entered the restaurant moments after they did, slipping into a booth near the back. From there, we had a clear view of Amanda and Daniel at their table by the window. They were leaning close, speaking in hushed tones, their hands occasionally brushing across the table. "Unbelievable," Jessica muttered, her knuckles whitening as she gripped her coffee cup. I was about to suggest confronting them right then and there when Jessica suddenly stood. Her expression was calm, but her eyes blazed with fury. "Let's end this," she said. I followed her to their table, my heart pounding in my chest. Amanda looked up first, her eyes widening in shock. Daniel's face turned a shade paler when he saw Jessica standing next to me. "Well," Jessica said, crossing her arms. "Isn't this cozy?" Amanda stammered, her gaze darting between me and Jessica. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice cold. Daniel tried to intervene, but Jessica silenced him with a glare. "Don't even start," she snapped. "I've seen the texts, the photos. I know everything." The restaurant seemed to fall silent around us, the weight of the confrontation drawing the attention of nearby diners. Amanda opened her mouth to speak but closed it again, her face flushing with humiliation. Jessica leaned closer, her voice low but cutting. "You've been lying to both of us. But here's the thing, we're done playing along." Amanda and Daniel exchanged a panicked look, their carefully constructed lies crumbling before our eyes. I folded my arms, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You wanted an escape? Congratulations. You've escaped everything we had." The drive home from the restaurant was silent, except for the sound of Jessica's knuckles tapping against the steering wheel. My thoughts raced as I replayed Amanda's face, her wide-eyed panic, the way she couldn't even muster a defense. When Jessica pulled up to my house, she turned to me. "What now?" I hesitated. "I'm going to confront her again. She can't keep running from this." Jessica nodded, her expression hard. "If you need anything, call me." "Same to you," I said, before stepping out of the car. Inside, the house was dark. Amanda wasn't home yet, but I knew she'd come eventually. I poured myself a drink and waited, the hours dragging by until I heard her car pull into the driveway. The front door opened, and Amanda stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She froze when she saw me sitting in the living room, a single lamp casting a dim glow over the room. "Nathan," she said, her voice uncertain. "Sit," I said firmly, nodding toward the chair opposite me. She hesitated, but then she sighed and sank into the chair, setting her purse on the floor. "You were with him," I said, my voice calm but cold. Her eyes widened slightly. "What are you talking about? Don't lie to me, Amanda," I snapped, my voice sharp. "Jessica and I followed you tonight. We saw you with Daniel." The color drained from her face, but she quickly masked it with defiance. "You're spying on me now? That's rich, Nathan. You don't get to play the victim here," I said, leaning forward. "I know about the hotel, the emails, the note. You've been lying to me for months, maybe longer. How long? Amanda, how long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "What does it matter? It matters because I trusted you," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "We built a life together and you threw it away for... what? Some thrill? Some escape?" Her gaze faltered for a moment, but then she squared her shoulders. I was unhappy, Nathan. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said, my tone icy. She looked away, her jaw tightening. Fine. I was bored. Okay? Bored of this house, this routine, this marriage. Daniel made me feel alive again. Like I wasn't just some wife stuck in a suburban nightmare. Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. And instead of talking to me about it, you decided to destroy everything we had, I said bitterly. Amanda didn't respond. Instead, she stood and grabbed her purse. Where are you going? I demanded, rising to my feet. To clear my head, she said, her voice cold. I can't deal with this right now. She walked out the door, leaving me standing there, alone. Over the next week, Amanda and I barely spoke. She stayed out late most nights, and when she was home, the silence between us was suffocating. Jessica and I kept in touch, sharing updates on how we were handling things. She had confronted Daniel as well, and though he'd begged for forgiveness, she wasn't sure if their marriage could recover. One evening, Amanda finally broke the silence. We need to talk, she said, standing in the doorway of the living room. I turned to face her, my expression guarded. Talk about what? About us, she said, stepping into the room. I gestured for her to sit, but she shook her head, pacing instead. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, and I realize I made mistakes. But you weren't exactly perfect either, Nathan. I raised an eyebrow. So this is my fault now? I'm not saying that, she said quickly. But you've been so distant, so focused on your work, on everything but me. I felt invisible. That's not an excuse to cheat, I said sharply. I know, she admitted, her voice softening. I'm not asking for you to forgive me. I needed you to know how I felt. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I don't know if we can fix this, I said finally. How do we come back from this, Amanda? She didn't answer. Instead, she sat down, burying her face in her hands. The following weeks were a blur of arguments, silence, and half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. Amanda moved into the guest room, and we began splitting our lives into two separate spheres. Jessica called me one night, her voice tinged with sadness. Daniel moved out, she said. He's staying at a hotel while we figure things out. I'm sorry, I said, unsure of what else to say. Don't be, she replied. It's better this way. For me, for the kids. Her strength amazed me, even as I struggled to find my own. Amanda and I eventually decided to see a counselor, but the sessions felt more like postmortems than efforts to save our marriage. One day, after a particularly tense session, Amanda turned to me as we walked to the car. I think we both know this isn't working, she said quietly. I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me. Yeah, I think you're right. The decision to separate was mutual, but that didn't make it any easier. Amanda and I spent the next few weeks untangling our lives, dividing possessions, closing joint accounts, and navigating the uncomfortable logistics of moving on. She decided to stay with a friend until she could find a place of her own. On her last day in the house, she stood in the doorway with a suitcase in hand, her expression unreadable. I'm sorry, Nathan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As she walked out the door, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. This chapter of my life was over, but the scars it left behind would take time to heal. For weeks, the house felt hollow without her. I buried myself in work, trying to fill the empty hours with productivity. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the memories lingered. Reminders of the life we'd built and the mistakes that had shattered it. Jessica and I stayed in touch, though our conversations grew less frequent as we each tried to rebuild our lives. She decided to file for divorce from Daniel, citing irreconcilable differences. At least now I can start over, she said during one of our final phone calls. Yeah, I agreed, though the thought of starting over still felt daunting. Months passed, and slowly, life began to take shape again. I redecorated the house, painting over the walls Amanda had chosen, replacing furniture that felt too tied to our past. It was a small step, but it helped. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I stumbled across a box of photos. Most were from happier times, vacations, holidays, the early days of our relationship. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to reminisce, not with bitterness but with acceptance. We'd loved each other once. That love had faltered, but it wasn't all for nothing. A year after Amanda left, I found myself at a coffee shop, waiting to meet someone new. A friend had insisted on setting me up, claiming it was time I dipped my toe back into the dating pool. Her name was Allison, and she had a warm smile and an easy laugh that immediately put me at ease. We talked for hours, sharing stories and finding common ground in unexpected places. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of hope. Amanda and I never spoke again after the divorce was finalized. She moved to a new city, started a new job, and, as far as I knew, a new life. Jessica and I occasionally exchanged updates, but our paths diverged naturally as we both moved forward. She seemed happier, more at peace. As for me, I learned to let go of the anger, the betrayal, and the endless what-ifs. Life had thrown me into the depths of heartbreak, but I'd emerged stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace whatever came next.